Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Welcome to this Friday afternoon. I guess Friday at noon. Sorry, I'm 10 minutes late, but I said I was going to be 10 minutes late. So I guess I'm not late. I'm here when I said I was going to be. So welcome to all of you, you imagination connoisseurs, you, the members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. I hope you're having a good day. Well, I want to start this chat out. First of all, once again, and Gilbert is here. Aren't you, buddy? Good to see you, buddy. I've had some extraordinary letters. By the way, yes, this is a Her Universe t-shirt I'm wearing. I am not beyond wearing women's fashions. I like to wear this shirt because I figured for today, I'm going to admit to being a troll. I'm going to admit that I've become what I beheld, and I'm ashamed of it. But instead of being a troll, I'm a Gorn. I think that's what the Star Trek fandom needs. Instead of trolling, you're being a Gorn. That's what I've decided to do. So I decided to wear my Her Universe t-shirt. It's a vintage Her Universe t-shirt now because I think they put it out in their initial batch of fashion. So anyway, again, before I get to my admission of trolldom, I again, the letters I've received are just extraordinary, and while this is a different kind of a letter, but it's definitely up there, and it really made me stop and take stock of my own life, which I never would have thought when I started doing these Robservations chats dealing with geeky subjects and the Post-Geek Singularity that I would be getting the kind of letters that I'm getting, but they're extraordinary, and I love sharing them with you, and apparently you guys like them too, because the feedback I'm getting is incredible. Now strap yourselves in for this one, kids. And I mean that. This one comes to me from Saul Hernandez. Dear Notorious RMB, first of all, I am so sorry about the length of this letter. I want to say thank you for your continued participation in this, the Post-Geek Singularity. One of my friends recommended I listen to you, and I'm so glad that he did. Here is the quick story of me. I was bullied in junior high and high school because I had very bad acne. My parents did not speak English, and we were poor, so we only had one TV in the house. I know they did the best they could do, but would make harmful comments about my acne, which really just shot my self-esteem even lower. They always thought it was my fault for eating too much chocolate or for having too many lustful thoughts. They were frustrated because I didn't fix it. My brothers, I'm the youngest by 5 years, were also not very supportive, and were all lucky enough to not be stricken with the horrible acne I had. So I had very low self-esteem, and as a consequence, I was very shy and awkward. My only escape were books and TV when I could actually watch it. I loved science fiction and fantasy books, and I loved science fiction and fantasy television. I couldn't wait to go to the public library to read the next Piers Anthony, Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, etc. In fact, I would be so heartbroken when I finished a book that if there was a sequel and the library didn't have it, or worse, they said they had it but couldn't find it, they had to transfer it from another library. Well, that waiting time was when I really got into comics. I'll never forget seeing X-Men 207 in a trash can. Yes, someone threw it away, with Wolverine on the cover, and wondering, who is this guy? I remember running home from school and begging my mother not to watch her novella so I could watch the next Robotech installment. I love Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, and I really love Star Trek, the original series. But Star Trek, The Next Generation was my thing. I love the series so much. I will always remember when Measure of Man had me thinking for days. I loved when Q snapped his finger in anger and sent the crew to the Borg for the first time in Q Who. Darmok and the Drumhead made me quickly idolized Captain Picard. Here was the best captain in Starfleet. And of course, they had him on the best ship with the best crew. I would have given anything to be a part of a crew like that. When I was in college and finally had some friends that would take me to a Star Trek convention or a comic book convention or make me play my first D&D type game at one of these conventions, I couldn't believe what I was missing. Then when I was 24, I was diagnosed with neuromyelitis optica, and I lost my sight 2 years later. I felt like the man in the Twilight Zone episode, Time Enough at Last. I was finally getting my self-esteem back, had friends who liked me for me, and then it all just fell away. Trust me, I went through some tough times. Even remembering any of these things I mentioned earlier now brought me pain. I admit I was feeling sorry for myself. My friends were all now graduating university, getting on with their lives and families, and couldn't comfort or help me. Then I started to listen to you on your channel and on the John Campea show. When I hear your excitement for all things geek, when I hear your always optimistic and wise and funny talks, I can't tell you how much you've helped me. I feel like the community you are building is like the TNG Enterprise crew with the notorious R&B as captain. A community that helps each other, a community that can agree to disagree and still have respect for one another, a community where it's okay to be shy or to have really bad acne or to be lonely, because here is a community that accepting and helpful and passionate about being good because it's the right thing to do. Rob, I mean this in the most serious way I can say it. You absolutely saved my life, and I'm so proud to be a part of the community you've created and fostered. I have a new zeal on life, and I'm going to pursue my dream of being a screenwriter. I am now giving my first talk to high school students at my old high school about being bullied. And no matter how dark things can get, there is always a light, even if we cannot see it literally. Robert, you were my spark, and I thank you for that. I hope on the days when you feel like your show maybe isn't reaching people or you feel like your show isn't helping, that you remember me, and maybe I could be your spark to not quit either. I was wondering, if I go to a convention with my friends, is it okay to go up to you and shake your hand and ask for an autograph or just say hi? I know you probably get so many people coming up to you, and I would never want to impose on a famous person. My name is Saul, by the way, and if you want to read and share my boring letter, you can. Thank you again so much for everything. Saul Hernandez. Well, I mean, I don't even know what to say to a letter like that. By the way, I actually looked up what Saul was talking about, and it is. Let me find that again, so you guys can read about it. Neuromyelitis optica is an autoimmune disease, and it's part of a family of diseases, and it's not fun to have, and sometimes you can come back from it. There's recurring symptoms. It's not a good thing. So, Saul, I feel for you, man, and I hope for the best for you. But again, your letter is one of the reasons like why we're doing this in the first place. And WonderCon is going on right now. I've been going to WonderCon since it was in Oakland, and it's in Anaheim now. It used to be in San Francisco, but now they moved it down here, and it's sort of an adjunct to Comic-Con. Comic-Con bought it. It started out as a fan-run convention, and then Comic-Con bought it, and it's a great convention. It's like what Comic-Con used to be 20 years ago. You can still get into it. You can still move around. It's a lot of fun, and I quite enjoy it. I'll be there tomorrow and Sunday. And if you want to come up to me and talk to me, anybody can come up and talk to me. I'm not famous enough to not talk to. And the whole reason I've been going to conventions since I was a kid was because I like meeting like-minded people. And I don't think that talking on the internet on my YouTube show makes me a celebrity of any kind. And it certainly doesn't make me above talking to anybody who wants to have a conversation about anything, because that's why I go to conventions. So, Saul, if you're there, if I see you around, please come up to me and say hello. I would love that. And I dearly appreciate you reaching out. And thank you for this letter. It was very touching to me. And again, it was very moving. Now to shift gears, here's another quick one. Angela Dashner wrote me. Angela says, "Dear Rob, just started listening to your show, and I just love listening to the show. And I found it because I used to love listening to you with John Schnepp on Heroes, and I was excited to find you again on the John Campea show, which I've listened to for many years. I've been in love with Star Trek since I was a little girl, watching the series with my mom, who introduced me to the great Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, and Dr. McCoy. I just love the relationship between these characters, and now I love the relationship between the characters in the Avengers. My mom has been gone now for over 20 years, and I'm always grateful that she encouraged me into my love of Star Trek and superheroes and my love of theater. I spend my creative outlet as a theater professional, and one of the great joys of my life was getting to produce The Hobbit last month, one of my other great loves. Just wanted to thank you because I love listening to your chats. Usually catch it the next day on my way home from work, and it always makes my day better. Thanks. Well, thank you, Angela. Thank you for writing in. That was very kind of you to say. Now, here's the final letter I'm going to read today, which directly applies to what I'd like to discuss. This one comes from Logan George. Logan says, remember that look on Kirk's face in Star Trek IV when he sees that Spock is swimming with the whales at the aquarium, the Cetacean Institute? I had that look on my face while watching Star Trek Discovery's episode Perpetual Infinity. This was last night's episode. Nothing made any sense. Doomcock said the previous Red Angel episode was the worst, but I can't wait to see his reaction to this steaming pile. You talk about it being written by committee. I think it's worse. I think the writers of each episode haven't seen the one before theirs, and they have no idea what the writers of the next one will do, and they just don't care. The only one I've liked this season was the visit to Talos 4, just to see Pike and Vina meet up again. But yes, as you said, they should have reshot the cage scenes they needed, except that Ethan Peck would have had to shave Spock's beard. Whenever there is good stuff with Pike and Spock, and even the tiny visit of number 1, I keep wishing the show was set on the Enterprise in the years between the cage and when Kirk takes command. That could have been a show. And every episode ends with Dr. Boyce handing Pike a martini. That would be cool. But they would need writers like Ira Bear or Manny Coto. I saw an interview online with Braga and Coto when they were on 24, and they were asked on Enterprise which worked best, the season-long Xindi arc or the 2- and 3-part mini arcs of season 4. Both of them said the mini arcs. That's the approach Disco should have taken, but they would have needed Coto or someone like him. Ron Moore isn't available since he's busy with that Star show Outlander, and his Fall of All Mankind, or his Fall, I think it's For All Mankind for Apple. But if you're going to do a Trek show, CBS should have gotten the best people no matter the cost. Imagine if Matthew Weiner were in charge, or Vince Gilligan, or both. And Baron Coto. The talent is out there. I have no idea if the Twilight Zone will work, but getting Jordan Peele seems smart. What a mess. The show needs smart writers who can craft plots that make sense. They need science consultants from JPL, or heck, there are great science YouTubers who are smart. Plus, they need Trek-experts who have at least read the Okuda chronology and the Sternbach tech manual. They kept saying it'll make sense at the end. It won't. Their only way out of the corners they've wrote themselves into is a total cosmic reset. I wish Harlan Ellison were alive and well and doing weekly reviews of this goofy show. He'd easily expose and explain the plot holes and total illogic of the storytelling. He was a stickler for plots making sense. And yes, Enterprise's Cogenitor is one of my favorite episodes, just like you said. It had the great Andreas Katsoulis, maybe one of the last things he did. And Trip is great in that story. You want to root for him because he's kind of right, but he's also wrong. That episode explains why Starfleet would later need the Prime Directive. The brilliance is that it gives the lesson without ever mentioning the Prime Directive since it didn't exist yet. Enterprise deserves to be ranked among the best Trek shows, along with TOS, TNG, DS9. Voyager is kind of JJ Trek is a calamity, and Disco is utter confusion. I'd be fine if they want to say that the Trek created and produced by Roddenberry and Berman is a sealed universe, the canon. Everything outside of the Roddenberry-Berman universe can be considered a fever dream, unless they do major surgery and fix this mess. Well, Logan, thank you for that thoughtful letter. And I can't say I don't agree with you because I do. But that brings me to this chat. This morning, I tweeted out sort of a tweaky, beady. Well, this morning, I tweeted out a cheeky tweet where I used the logo of Control, which is the organization that Get Smart worked for, Agent Smart, on the Get Smart television show, because, of course, the big bad AI in Discovery is called Control, because isn't that interesting? You know, I long for the days of Skynet when Skynet wanted to obliterate all human life, all sentient, life in the universe, or at least on Earth. Um, but unfortunately, but anyway, so as a result of that tweet, I also said that Queen should have written a song called "Center of the Universe" that was all about Michael Burnham. Now these were meant to be tongue in cheek, and they were supposed to be funny, but there was a lot of response to these tweets. And John Campea, who I like doing a show with every weekday, except on Fridays usually, he actually texted me this morning. He doesn't usually text me for what I put on social media, but this morning he said, "Look, man, you know, you're kind of just like the same Last Jedi trollers and the people that are trolling Captain Marvel, and maybe you should just pull back on your anti-discovery rhetoric." And he said, "I'm not telling you have to do it, but you might want to just consider it. Just take a little step back." And I was like, "You know what?" And he said, "I'm telling you this as your friend." And I appreciated it. I honestly did appreciate getting that tweet from him. Now, it really did get me thinking. It got me thinking that yes, I have been a troll. I've been a Gorn. I've been a Star Trek Gorn. I've been sort of carpet bombing the surface from my favorite perch in orbit. I've been just bombing Cestus 3, and if Cestus 3 are Discovery fans, that's kind of what I've been doing. And I have been doing so coming from the same place of weird entitlement. I mean, isn't it weird to think that you have entitlement issues over over a 53-year-old television series? I mean, I do have entitlement issues over a 53-year-old television series, but there's a reason for that. And the reason is I've worked on Star Trek both professionally and personally, and then I've also been a Star Trek fan since I would assume was 1972 when I was a small child watching Star Trek during syndication for its first, and I literally watched it every weekday for 10 years, perhaps. I think it was 10 years. So I mean, Star Trek, as I've said before, is kind of my religion. And I've learned so much from Star Trek, and Star Trek has sent me in many directions, and it's pushed me to learn about the real world. I mean, my interest in Star Trek, I'll never forget watching the episode Requiem for Methuselah, which is a third season episode. That's the episode with Flint and Reyna. In the episode, Flint, he's so powerful, he's an immortal being. He shrinks the Enterprise and puts it on a desktop, and Kirk famously looks into the bridge. Of course, they always cut that out in the syndication prints, but you can see it if you watch it on streaming. But I remember you find out who Flint is in the episode, and I'm not going to ruin it for you if you haven't seen it, because it's got a goofy ending, but I really liked that episode. And it's really interesting because the Reeves Stevens, in their fantastic Star Trek novel Federation, which I highly recommend, it's the book that gets the crews of the TOS crews and the TNG crew together, and it's infinitely better than Generations. It's an incredible book. But the character of Flint in that episode is also a character in their Star Trek novel. But I remember in that episode, Spock is marveling at Flint's collection of art and music, and Spock famously plays a waltz in that episode. And I remember as a kid, he's mentioning people, and I remember asking my mom, "Are those real people? Is Brahms a real guy?" And that's how I was like, "Oh, I went and got a Brahms record," and it's just like listening to movie soundtracks. The Star Wars soundtrack, John Williams' Star Wars soundtrack, when I was 10, got me into the list. I raided my mother's Beethoven records. She had about 50 records, and no one ever touched them until I was 10 years old. My mother never played one of those records. They were above our phone in the family room, which was the room I was in mostly. It's our TV room. My mother had never touched those records. I didn't even know that she had those records. I never even looked at them. And when I heard the Star Wars soundtrack, I was like, "Oh, I want to hear music like that." My mom was like, "Well, I've got Beethoven records downstairs." And I'm like, "No, I didn't know that." So I started listening to the Beethoven symphonies because of Star Wars, and I love them. And then I started noticing, as I watched more and more movies, that Beethoven's music would show up in other films, not just the fifth, but the seventh. Beethoven's Seventh Symphony was used in many, many movies. Zardoz makes good use of it, but there's nothing better than the Seventh Symphony if you want to have some kind of pre-battle music or something mournful or sorrowful. There's some good good movements in Beethoven's Seventh, but so science and then Star Trek novels, not novels, but Star Trek led me to reading novels because I had read, as you read about Star Trek and learned about Star Trek, you're like, oh, so like Richard Matheson and Theodore Sturgeon and Sam Peoples and some of these people were legit. Harlan Ellison. I mean, I didn't know Harlan Ellison until he's a novelist. And I started reading Harlan Ellison's books. I remember when I joined the science fiction book club, that's when I first got, when I was 10, I got the Harlan Ellison's his Dangerous Visions anthology that he edited. And again, Dangerous Visions. So Star Trek has always led me, not just have I been a fan and have I been buying, the manual came out and the Enterprise blueprints came out, and Star Trek has always been something that has piqued an intellectual curiosity in me. And it certainly led me down the path of reading great science fiction novels. I mean, I first started with the names I recognized, but then I soon branched out. I mean, Robert Bloch, who wrote Psycho, wrote an episode of Star Trek. And once you started reading canonical, I mean, when I say canonical, the great canon of science fiction works, the Sci-Fi book club led me to read things like Dune and led me to read things like Clark's Childhood's End or Mission of Gravity or any other. I mean, I can't even begin. I read The Sword of Shannara because I was a member of the science fiction book club, and I really began when I was 10 reading the great works of science fiction. And it made me a lover of stories and a lover of great science fiction. But not only that, science fiction then led me to other novels. And then you, of course, in school, you start reading. I remember reading Sinclair Lewis's Main Street, which I thought was an incredible book. I actually wrote a paper on Sinclair Lewis's Main Street, and I started the paper. I have it. I actually have this paper. I think I wrote it in an honors class called Utopia that Carol Penke taught when I was in high school. And on the paper, this paper I wrote about Sinclair Lewis's Main Street, I wrote a quote: "Another dream that failed. There's nothing sadder." And that's what Kirk said about Elias Sandoval and his colonists from the first season episode, This Side of Paradise, famously the one with the spores and Leela Kalomi getting zapped with the spores. And so Star Trek has always been this kind of thing that meant something to me as a thinking person. And even the worst Star Trek episodes, even when you go to episodes like Spock's Brain and Plato's Stepchildren, there's things that are interesting even in those episodes, as goofy as they might be. I can't say much good about And the Children Shall Lead, which I think is truly the most abysmal episode of the original series that I really don't get anything out of at all. I mean, Melvin Belli is Gorgon from the Angel. I do like that little chant they say in the episode, and it does actually have a true moment of sadness at the end when the kids realize what's happened to their parents. It's pretty shocking. But Star Trek instilled in me a great love of coherent storytelling. And what Star Trek was able to do, like The Twilight Zone was able to do, like The Outer Limits was able to do, these shows were able to set up a premise, set up new characters, but set up a premise and pay that premise off in 52 minutes. And that was an art. The great Twilight Zone episodes were only 22 minutes, 25 minutes maybe. And they did the same thing. They created brand new characters, a premise. They explored that premise and played it to its logical conclusion in less than a half an hour. And that was amazing. And if I always say this to anybody who wants to be a writer, one of the great shows to look at is The Twilight Zone, because it teaches you. And I also have a great love of short stories, specifically genre short stories. I mean, I can't get enough of the world's best science fiction stories, the world's best fantasy and horror stories. I mean, I have countless anthologies of short stories. I mean, even O. Henry, I've got collections of O. Henry stories. I mean, I love great storytelling. And we now have 53 years of Star Trek to look back on. And there's been great Star Trek. There's been really good Star Trek. There's been good Star Trek. There's been mediocre Star Trek. And there's been genuinely bad Star Trek. But we do have a rich half-century plus legacy of these stories. Not only that, but if you delve into the extended universes of Star Trek, there's comic stories. Some have been actually very good. There have been goofy comic stories as well. The Gold Key run, you had Italian artists drawing the comic that had never seen the show, hence flames coming out of the shuttle bay of the TOS Enterprise. So there's Star Trek has run a wide gamut of all kinds of storytelling, the novels as well. But I have never found myself actively, like, I didn't like Voyager. I'll freely admit it. I thought Voyager was all over the place, and to me, it was a copy of a copy of a copy. And it was the first show where we had Star Trek tropes. I mean, you could say that Odo and being an alien was sort of a Star Trek trope, like Spock. That's a Star Trek thing, but by the time we get to Voyager, it had really been played out. It was like mix and match, plug and play Star Trek. That's not to say as Star Trek went along, as Voyager went along, it didn't have some great episodes. It did. It was just a very schizophrenic show. And I thought that they never lived up to their premise. The idea that I really liked the idea of what Voyager could have been, which was a show. Essentially, imagine if Columbus had gone to the New World or Cortez burned his ships. You know, that if Voyager was stuck in the Delta Quadrant, there was never any way for the Voyager to get home. And so the show became about world building. It became about building a Federation beachhead in basically the Wild West of space. I thought that would have been a really interesting show. How do we pacify, or how do we build a coalition and build a federation from a very disparate, desperate area of the galaxy? That's what I thought Voyager should have been up. But that's just me. So Voyager was very schizophrenic. Enterprise could never live up to its own premise, but there were some, good episodes. And again, a lot of it was rehashed, Star Trek rehash. They tried to do something interesting with the Xindi arc, and there's a lot of interesting stuff in the Xindi arc. And of course, by the time they get to season 4, as Rick Berman and Brandon Braga jokingly told us when we were making our Enterprise special features, they said the only thing they were doing with Enterprise seasons 1 through 3 was to set it up for Manny Coto to take over for season 4, which I thought was pretty interesting. But anyway, so that's where I'm at with Star Trek. Of course, I worked on the Star Trek Experience, where I spent 2 years creating all the videos that you see. What the videos you did see. Somebody actually sent me a letter asking me about what we were doing and how do we master those because of the quality of the video. Well, we were working off 3/4-inch masters to answer that question, 3/4-inch masters. But when you were displaying a lot of that stuff, when you went through the actual museum and there was screens, they looked pretty good. I thought they looked pretty good. But when you were seeing them projected, the 3 large videos, like the battle video, those were projected. So lighting was a problem. But after we finished those videos, interestingly enough, they realized because they had to make sure they were kept as promotional. My edits, a lot of them had really fast edits. They had to overlay on each shot what episode it was from, so they could truly claim it was promotional, which of course ruined the videos for anybody that watches them, because it was no longer like a cool montage. It was an advertisement, and there was literally text on videos that were never meant to have text on them. Otherwise, we wouldn't have cut them so fast. But because of the rights issues with Star Trek, they realized this after the fact, after the Star Trek Experience had been opened, and they changed those videos. But Star Trek Discovery to me is another animal entirely. And after watching last night's episode, I either was going to choke myself out because I had to put myself out of my misery, but then I realized I have this movie to finish, and I enjoy talking to everybody here as part of the Post-Geek Singularity community. And I'm supposed to go, let's face it, April is perhaps the geekiest month in recent years. I mean, not since the summer of '82 have we had so much geek amazing. I mean, it is a potpourri of geekness in April. We got Shazam opening. We've got Hellboy opening. We've got Game of Thrones season 8 and Endgame opening. And I'm not going to murder myself over Star Trek Discovery, at least not yet. Not at least until May. My birthday's in May. I'll wait until then. But anyway, I really couldn't stand. I couldn't stand. I was making these cheeky tweets, and I realized when John wrote me this letter, I'm like, have I become that guy? Have I become the dude that we don't like? I mean, I become that guy. I look. I try and find something. My whole trip is positivity, and it's born out of the fact that, I met a lot of people in Sunday school with green inked numbers on their wrists who were Holocaust survivors. And most of my life, I've always said to myself, there's nothing in my life that will ever be as bad as somebody telling me my home is not my home anymore. It's been requisitioned by the National Socialist Party, and all of my friends and family and loved ones are carted off to concentration camps to be systematically exterminated. Nothing that's ever going to happen in my life is going to be worse than this. So basically, everything in my life is pretty much a gift. And I try and look at every day as being every day that I'm not in the ground, because I'm going to be in the ground soon enough. I try and have a good time. I try and have fun. And I'm surrounded by, I mean, look at this. I am surrounded by all of this stuff I love. I have loved ones here, but I've also got all the stuff that I love, including them, all this geeky stuff that exists. I mean, look at this. This 2001 EVA pod. I've wanted a model of the 2001 EVA pod since I was a little kid. I have it. There's secondary market parts with lights and etched brass to add more detail to it. It's incredible. I got my Ed 209 here. I got Pearl up there. I got an Eagle Transporter, 1/48 scale. I mean, I'm making this geek citadel to talk to you from. I got my Hot Toys figures. I got Bane to crash your plane. So things are great. So why is it that I feel the need to bag on this show that a lot of people love? Well, I feel the need to bag on it because I believe it's, with all the resources that are available, they're not making good use of those resources. That's what, but that's my own opinion. That's my own opinion. But it's really the storytelling. They're going back to an artificial intelligence plot, which makes not a lick of sense. They've got, I don't want to spoil what's going on, but none of it makes any sense to me. And especially when I've been reading great science fiction for 50 years. There's just a lot of great ideas, better ideas to tell the story that I think that they're trying to tell badly on Discovery. There's so many directions and so many things that they could have cited or went to and said, perhaps if we had I don't see that the people working on the show have a great working knowledge of the genre that they're working in, not just Star Trek, but science fiction. I mean, if you're going to touch on AI, you're going to, watch a movie like Her. Her has a really interesting examination of where artificial intelligence, where the actual singularity might take us. And I don't see a unique Star Trek take on AI. I see a cliche. I mean, we're going all the way back to Colossus, the Foreman project in 1970, which has a more interesting take on artificial intelligence than what they're doing with over the last couple of episodes of Discovery. And that's what really bothers me, is that we don't see Star Trek, which has traditionally been very forward thinking. It seems mired in old cliched storytelling, at least for this season, and none of it makes any sense to me. I don't know why. It's like, have you guys ever read a science fiction novel? Have you ever watched an episode of Star Trek, or have you seen the great science fiction films of the last 50 years? Not just Star Trek, but science fiction films. I mean, if you're going to start dealing with time travel, or you're going to, I mean, every Star Trek has had a better view of time travel than what we're getting now, at least in my own opinion. And last night when someone's, well, I guess I can say, if you haven't seen the last couple episodes of Star Trek, so the Red Angel turns out to be, spoiler alert, turn this off right now if you don't want me to say this. It turns out to be Burnham's mom, who's traveling around in basically an Iron Man suit that helps her jump through time. But there was one moment in last night's episode where she refers back to the second episode of this season of Discovery, where she actually says, yeah, when I moved all those people 50,000 years to this planet. It's just like, wait, what? Did you pick them all up? Like you moved this church. I've bagged on the fact that the Red Angel actually moved this church 50,000 light years. And I'm like, why there? How did you pick this church up? Like, it's just those people? What about the rest of the people? I mean, if you can move one church, why not all the churches? I just, when I heard that line, it just something struck me about it. I'm like, did anybody sit in the edit bay and look at this episode? Did anybody? Anyway. But what it made me realize when I woke up this morning, I was still mad about it. So I'm like tweeting, like, haha. And then John Campea wrote me, and I realized, and he's not wrong, I've become toxic. My attitudes about Star Trek have become toxic. And here I am. I can't be hypocritical and espouse a message of positivity and being part of the Post-Geek Singularity, and then at the same time turn around and go, fuck this show, as much as I want to. Because there's people out there that like it. There's people out there that really love Star Trek Discovery. And I have said about those people, I've said, listen, if you guys, Star Trek Discovery is going to be the first Star Trek that a lot of people come to see, which, of course, I think is a great tragedy. But I like the fact that people are coming to Star Trek that have never seen it before, just like with the J.J. Abrams movies, as much as I might not be able to stand those films. And again, I think it all comes down to the storytelling. I believe that the Star Trek we've seen over the last decade, they've not looked upon Star Trek as being a serious, thoughtful, important method, because Star Trek now, a Star Trek story, Star Trek is a genre unto itself. And I feel that the custodians of the Star Trek franchise feel somehow that they're slumming. And I think that the way they cavalierly treat science fiction tropes, especially this season, what they've done to the character of Spock, to me, it really is abysmal. And I really believe that the writing staff of Star Trek Discovery are way out of their depth. They're not genre experts. There's no affinity. There's certainly no affinity being shown in the stories they're telling to the rich history of science fiction storytelling and Star Trek storytelling. However, I understand that a lot of our viewership, they don't have that knowledge either. So this could be their first experience with seeing these kinds of shows that really delving into the idea of time travel and really delving into the idea of mad AI and really delving into the idea of, we should be scared of technology. All of the concepts that are in Star Trek Discovery are being encountered by certain viewers, new viewers, for the very first time. And I should not be the kind of person that says to those people, well, you guys, you don't know what you might like Star Trek Discovery, but who are you to like it? I shouldn't be doing that. As much as I like Star Trek, as much as I have a history of loving Star Trek, that doesn't give me the right to go rain on these other people's parades, because it's the first time they've ever encountered Star Trek, and perhaps it will be their gateway, and then they're going to go back and find the original series and the Next Generation, because certainly the Picard show, people are going to see the Picard show, and that'll be their first experience with Jean-Luc Picard, and they have 178 hours of stories to go back and delve into. Would I want to then look? I think the Picard show, while it interests me, the writing staff, while some of those people give me a little bit of hope, I don't think that the stewards, the overall, I don't think Alex Kurtzman has what it takes to run a Star Trek show. I don't, but I will hold out hope. But there's going to be a lot of people that are going to go back and see Next Generation for the first time because of this Picard series. And I don't want to remove that. I don't want to remove that joy from those people. If somebody is watching Star Trek Discovery and loving it, who am I to try and tell those people that their joy, that their love, that their affection for something is wrong? You know, I mean, on the other hand, you can tell people that ideologically, I don't think National Socialism, I don't think Nazism is right. Now, I do believe, if you're talking about political ideology that I think is pernicious and dangerous and has proved to be deadly on a mass scale, it's okay to say that's wrong. However, somebody would say, well, entertainment. I think bad storytelling. I think storytelling that it does a disservice to the very genre that it's a part of is actually detrimental to the health and well-being of the body politic, because the stories that people are getting exposed to through Star Trek Discovery, I believe, are actually they're detrimental to someone who should understand what great storytelling really is. And that's where I'm torn. I live in that middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge. I live in the Twilight Zone, man. I live there now. Our whole world is the Twilight Zone. There's a new Twilight Zone starting that, even though it's on CBS All Access, I'm all in. They have me. I can't wait to see it. I want to see it. But Star Trek Discovery really tears me up inside, because I want people to love Star Trek. I want people to come to Star Trek. But now I have people going, well, I love Star Trek Discovery, but the original series, I can't watch it. I'm just not going to. It's so stupid. Even Gilbert, he feels my pain. That's why he's barking. He's feeling how tense I am because of all of this. But anyway, I wanted to talk about that. What do you guys think? I think it's different than Star Wars, because I was disillusioned with Star Wars after I saw Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi, I famously said, was the biggest disappointment of my entire life, and it remains so after seeing Empire Strikes Back 26 times in the theater and being worshipful of the Star Wars movies. I don't, when I watched Last Jedi, to me, the story about Luke, while it might not have been where I wanted to see him go, I thought it was still very, very interesting. And at the end, when he confronts Kylo Ren, that's the most Jedi shit ever, where he doesn't even show up at the battle. I mean, what's more Jedi than that? But I understand, but there's not, I don't know. I won't get into that discussion. And the people that don't like Captain Marvel, the people that hated Captain Marvel were hating on Captain Marvel before they ever saw it. I don't believe in that. I believe you should absolutely wait until you see something and then hate on it. But being a troll, trying to take away, being a Gorn, that's what I want to. I want to start labeling Star Trek trolls Gorn. So I've been a Gorn, and I guess I want to apologize for those people who like Star Trek Discovery and feel that when they come to these chats that I've alienated them in some way, which I feel bad about, because I get these letters like the ones I read today, and I want this place, I want the Post-Geek Singularity to be a forum where I'm not just going to go Gorn out on somebody because they come in here with a differing point of view. I don't want it to be that way. I don't. And look, that I might wake up in the morning and tweet something horrible about Star Trek Discovery. But it is only because I care, and Star Trek has really been my religion for over 50 years. And, I hadn't seen it yet, but, it's taken me into middle age. Star Trek took me through. There was always new Star Trek as I grew up in life, and there still is. Unfortunately, over the last 10 years, Star Trek has not pushed forward. It's only looked back, and it's tried to reinvent what was already done well in the first place. And Star Trek, in my life, was, even with a prequel show like Enterprise, it dealt with an area of Star Trek, the Star Trek universe, we haven't seen before. But the last 10 years, they can't stop. They can't create their own original. What is their original vision for Star Trek? They're not only not making original Star Trek, then they're going back and they're borrowing stuff from movies like The Terminator and things that we've already seen done before, not just on Star Trek, but in other parts of pop culture, and done much better. I mean, Her is one of the greatest, most interesting examples of dealing with what the singularity might be that I've ever seen. And it's amazing. But anyway, I just want to apologize for being a troll. My trolling probably isn't going to go away anytime soon, but I want you guys to know that I'm aware of it, that I've been hypocritical, and I hope that you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community will still subscribe to this channel. For those who haven't, I've appreciated your ongoing support, and I can never get behind Discovery. But hey, I watch every episode hoping it's going to get better, even though last night my beautiful Panasonic 65-inch plasma screen that I dearly, dearly love and I can't replace. I was this close to smashing my fist through the screen. Hopefully I won't do that, but it's getting to the point where it's dangerous. First of all, let's get to the questions. Let's see what you guys have to say. I've been spouting off long enough. Eric Espiritu sends me a super chat. Well, thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. Loquacious primate. I like science, quote, Spock from last night, Star Trek Discovery. That was the only line that I thought was funny. But Spock saying, I like science, that's like Pete Carroll in an interview, Uncle Pete, the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. That's like Uncle Pete saying, I like football, in some weird, ironic, postmodern, you're supposed to laugh at that. I mean, that's the level of writing. I like science. Wouldn't Spock say something like, as you're aware, I'm quite fond of the scientific method or something. But no, I like science. Yeah. Okay. Dieter Bastian, good evening. It says, good evening. Dieter is all the way from Germany. And by the way, Dieter, you've sent me some letters I'm going to read. I haven't gotten to them yet. Good evening, Rob. You mentioned Joe Rogan yesterday. Have you seen the conversation with Henry Rollins and his strange friendship with William Shatner? Yes, I really enjoyed that. As people know, I'm a big fan of long-form conversations on YouTube. And it's funny because when I mention certain people, like if I say Joe Rogan and Dave Rubin, people are like, oh, they're alt-right or whatever. Joe Rogan's a leftist. But I enjoy those chats. I enjoy anybody who sits down and really delves into the issues. And Dave Rubin has had like Dr. Deborah So, who's she specializes in, she does sex research. And I love her stuff. I follow her on Twitter. The long form conversations that Dave Rubin's had with her are fascinating. But people come after me and they're like, you shouldn't listen to those. Look, I listen to people from all sides of the aisle. I do not limit myself to people that I only agree with, because I don't learn anything from people I only agree with. I mean, I do learn more about my own opinions, but I try and, like I tell people, in the morning, I like to go to CNN, the BBC, the New York Times, the Drudge Report, and watch the other side of the aisle and what they're reading. I like to read all of those things and see what's going on in the world. I like to read Haaretz, the Jerusalem Post. I don't discriminate where I get information from. I like to get information from everywhere and make up my own mind, because there's a lot of information out there to get, which is great. That's what life's all about. Mark C says, while Campy is right, your trolling is born out of knowledge. You know the product well enough to know what makes it work. The product does not get better by accepting garbage. Keep trolling. Well, Mark, you're right about that. But it's funny because my personal situation, because I was involved with the fan film Axanar that famously got sued, a lot of people proceed under the false assumption that I have some bone to pick with CBS, which I don't, by the way. I worked for CBS for 3 years and I had a great time. As a matter of fact, Marion Cordry and John Van Sitters, who John Van Sitters was recently promoted, they were dealing with all the consumer products and they've overseen the publishing division and all of the Star Trek books that have come out that I love, the reference manuals, everything that has come out, they oversee. They're wonderful people and do a fantastic job. And I can't say enough good things about them. If we had finished Axanar, people would have loved it, and no one, it wouldn't have ever happened. But we were too full of ourselves and didn't finish the movie and bitched and moaned too much. But anyway, that's water under the bridge. Willow Yang is here. Hello, Willow. Willow's, obviously, if you haven't heard my chat a couple days back when I read her letter, you should go back and listen to it, because it's great. I'm still getting many letters about your letter, which is great. Willow says, do you think I can appreciate the original Star Trek movies without seeing the show first? It'll probably take me months to get through the series. I'll tell you what, yes, it will. But I will send you, I will curate for you, I will send you my list of the top 20 original series episodes that you should read. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put it on my website. I'm going to put it on the Burnettwork.net. And for those of you who don't know, if you want to write me letters, the best place to do that is to the Burnettwork.net, my website. go there and send me a letter. And again, I'm going to start putting more stuff I'm getting from you. I'm going to have an imagination connoisseur gallery. Willow, by the way, she sent me a really cool series of photographs with explanations about the cultures that she's growing. She's growing E. coli because it helps them with their research. I'm gonna put that up there too. So anybody who's sending me pictures of their tattoos or their whatever, I'm gonna put it on. I'm gonna make an imagination connoisseur gallery on my website. But send me things. But I'm gonna put up my top 20 original series episodes for people. It'll be like the Cliff's Notes or the Reader's Digest condensed version of Star Trek that you don't have to see every episode. But a lot of people ask, well, it's so daunting. Where should I start? And I'll do that. I think that's a really good idea. I really like that idea of yours. So I think indeed, Emmett Beach says, I feel conflicted with Star Trek Discovery because the cast is great and doing the best with the writing, but it's so inconsistent. I agree. I mean, I like the cast, but they're given nothing to do and they're not written. I mean, I don't know half those characters and they didn't, it's really interesting. It's all about this external threat and like does the Red Angel, it had to turn out to be Michael Burnham's mother? I mean, is this the Michael Burnham show? It's really odd to me to think that's where we're at now. It's just bizarre. I think it's strange. Jonathan Peck says, the relationship between the Gorn and the Federation is a good microcosm of Star Trek fandom. Many of the older fans, the Gorns, feel they've been pushed. The relationship between the Gorn and the Federation is a good microcosm of Star Trek fandom. Many of the older fans, the Gorn, feel they've been pushed by newer fans like myself, seeing the show or enjoying the franchise. I think you might have left out a word, but Jonathan Peck is saying this. I think what you're saying, Jonathan, is that we old fans, again, are sort of set in our ways and we expect Star Trek to be a certain way, and that we're not. I think you're right. But I think the frustration, Jonathan, by the way, thank you for that super chat. The frustration is, Star Trek has meant so much to so many people for so long, the same way that Star Wars has meant so much to so many people for so long, that we want it all to be good. We want, again, I'll use the analogy that I grew up watching Ray Harryhausen's stop motion monster movies and like Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, or his work on a movie like Jason and the Argonauts, his fantasy movies like the Sinbad movies, the skeleton battle at the end of Jason and the Argonauts, which as a kid, I adored. If you're somebody that grew up, you were born in the late 80s, early 90s, and your first exposure to dinosaurs on film was Jurassic Park, you'll never be able to go back and watch a 50s or 60s Godzilla movie, and you're never going to be able to watch a Ray Harryhausen movie and feel the joy that we felt as kids watching those things, because you've already had Jurassic Park. And once you've seen photorealistic dinosaurs, why would you go back and watch quaint stop motion dinosaurs like in Valley of the Gwangi, which, by the way, I totally understand. I totally get it. I don't know if I would do that either. Once you've seen Jurassic Park, why would you go back? But there was some really great stories, and it's frustrating when you try and get people to go back and watch older movies and they don't. One of the things I know is a truism, but then again, I grew up in a world where I was watching 40 years of American pop culture history on a daily basis, starting out with, I'd watch Our Gang shorts from the 30s before school in the morning. Then when I came home, I would watch Leave It to Beaver or My Three Sons, Gilligan's Island, the Partridge Family, the Brady Bunch. And so I was exposed to 40 years of American pop culture in one afternoon. And I didn't have any prejudice against a black and white show, anything that was old. It just was old. I didn't not watch Universal monster movies when I was a kid because they were black and white. They were only in black and white. So I watched them and I loved them all. I think what's frustrating about the modern day is because we have so much great content now that's done so well, that it's really difficult for people that aren't in the habit or didn't grow up watching. I mean, when you already have Jurassic Park, why would you watch anything else if you're 5 years old? Because Jurassic Park is awesome. Photorealistic dinosaurs are awesome. Now, as I was growing up, Star Trek meant so much to me growing up. I learned so much. And as I said from the beginning of this talk, it led me to so many other interests in my life. I just don't see that happening with Star Trek Discovery. I don't think that there's enough in it to inspire people. Again, it's the show is really it's very downbeat and dour. And so many of the episodes of the original series, even though they went through hell, it would end on the bridge and you have like this family moment where everyone was everything was going to be okay. We got through it together. With Star Trek Discovery, is someone going to get thrown out in airlock? Are they going to start an episode with a big funeral for somebody we barely know? I mean, there's no joy in that show. And that's why I think, we worry about it. I don't mind. Again, if people enjoy the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies and they enjoy Star Trek Discovery, more power to them. And I think that's great because they grew up in a time that's different from a time I grew up in. And I'm a futurist, man. I always want to go forward. I don't want to go back. Who wants to go back? I always want to go forward. I've always said that to people, and I always want to go forward. But like what Emmett said, the cast is trying to do their best. They're trying to do everything they can to make the experience as good as it can be with what they're given. And I don't know if they're succeeding, but I get it. I mean, I get it. Topher Rock says, "You are no troll. Never heard you say that someone shouldn't watch or they suck if they enjoy the show. You're entitled to your opinion. Also, I have a new slogan for myself and this channel: geek and proud." Yes, sir. Well, I think everybody should be proud of who they are. That being a person is hard. It's hard. But I think everybody should be proud of what they love and what they do. And I certainly have been. I remember, I don't know if I told this story. The first day I was at the Evergreen State College, I was moving in to my 8th floor dorm. And I was wearing a Long Shot t-shirt, the Long Shot miniseries. I was wearing a Long Shot t-shirt and it was cool. It was Arthur Adams. And Arthur Adams' Long Shot art was cool. But I was wearing a shirt. I think it was probably a graffiti design shirt. I bought it at the comic book store. And I was wearing it. And I remember I was moving in. And there was a guy, swept back, feathered hair, really handsome, very tall dude named Gordon Trzynski. And he was nice. He's kind of this goofy guy. Everyone liked him. He wasn't an egomaniac or anything, but he was really funny. He was this handsome, funny clown guy. First day of college, I'm moving in, and he comes up to me, and he just thought it was really funny that I was wearing a comic book t-shirt. And he says to me, he's like, "I bet you think that comic book t-shirt's really cool, don't you?" And I looked at him and I said, "It is cool." and he thought about it because he was really taken aback. And I said, "Yeah, man, isn't this artwork cool?" I explained, Anna Cinti writing this miniseries, Arthur Adams wrote the comic, and my utter conviction in telling him that yes, this t-shirt that he was now making fun of was cool, it completely deflated any power he had over me, and we became great friends after that. But it was just funny that he wanted to make. I'm like, dude, I've been this way my whole life. You can't. There's nothing you can say to me. I know I'm cool. I'm cool. I have girlfriends. I'm coming from high school. I was never not cool growing up. I was video pirate. What do you want me to say? No, I'm just kidding. I wasn't that cool, but I was friends with everybody. And but I was cool by sticking up for my comic shirt. I wasn't, and after that, I've never been. I mean, look, if nothing else, you guys all know here, all you guys and girls and gentle beings and everybody else, all you non-binary folk, whoever you are who are at this chat, you all know that I am not ashamed to discuss my passions, and nor should you be. And it's been that way since I met Gordon Trzynski at the Evergreen State College. Jonathan Archer is here. Jonathan, do you know that you're going to command the NX-01 one day? Jonathan says, "The thing that confuses me with Star Trek Discovery is why change the Star Trek formula to open it up to a wider audience when the wider audience, in my opinion, are not sci-fi fans. Wouldn't you appeal to the existing fan base first?" Great question. Here's the thing. Star Trek has always been niche. It's always been a niche thing. The wide audience, I mean, there's flat earthers in the world. Flat earthers, every time they show a planet on Star Trek Discovery or Star Trek at all, is going to be offensive to flat earthers. So I agree. The reason they talk about widening the audience is one of money. Star Trek tops out. It's really interesting to me what they discovered with the Star Trek, with the J.J. Abrams films. Contrary to popular belief, those movies were not big money makers. Sure, their box office reflects how much, if you look at just the numbers, they might be the highest grossing Star Trek movies, but based on cost, they did not perform well. In fact, Star Trek Beyond might have lost a great deal of money. So they're trying to make this, there's a false assumption that by getting out there and appealing to the masses that you're somehow going to make more money. Star Trek will never appeal to the masses. It appeals to the people that it appeals to. It's not Star Wars. Star Wars is a mass appeal franchise. It's a fantasy franchise. It's knights in shining armor. It's samurai. It has a long tradition. It's very, very different than Star Trek. Star Trek is a show that is based on both intellectual curiosity and intellectual ability. The employment of intellect to solve problems. It's a problem-solving show, and that it requires work. You know, you sit back and you watch a fantasy or an action adventure. I love the MCU. I love Star Wars movies, but I don't watch the MCU to be philosophically challenged. I want to see the Avengers kick some ass. I want to see Captain America and Iron Man and Black Widow and Thor and Hulk and all the characters, Hawkeye. I want to see all those characters I've read go have great adventures and be wildly entertaining. And yes, there's inherently something interesting for the intellect there, and the characterizations make these people fun to deal with, and they're certainly not stupid. You know, but I don't expect what I get from Avengers or what I get from the MCU. I don't expect that from Star Trek, nor do I expect it from Star Wars. And Star Trek, by its very definition, you can't, to make it more mass market, to change it into something that it's not, fundamentally alters what Star Trek is. And what you do is you end up losing twice, because you lose your fan base, and your new fans are ultimately going to somehow at one point be betrayed, because Star Trek, what you're doing is you're creating something that isn't one or the other. You're not making good new Star Trek, and then you're trying to turn Star Trek into something that it's not, so you lose twice. At least that's the way I see it. There's a lot of people here today. Thank you all for being here. Bill Barkley says, Rob, do you think there's a chance we'll see the Borg appear on the Picard show, being that there's supposed to be 3 seasons of it? Well, I can tell you this. The original pitch for this Picard show involved the Borg. So, look, knowing these writers, I'm sure we'll see the Borg turn up way sooner than later, which is really unfortunate, because I would really like to see an examination of that character later in life. But they've saddled him with a bunch of other characters that are young. They're all young, hot people. I mean, I hope it's good. I hope it's just not a riff on Guardians of the Galaxy or Star Wars, but it seems to be that. But, you know, oh well. Matthew Gerwig says, it's not even really storytelling where entertainment has come today. This is the Trek we are getting. Yes. Bill Barkley says Gilbert has been expressing his opinion of Discovery. Vext14 says, my son watched some Star Trek Discovery with us last week. He's 5. I woke up this week before school, and he had started streaming the original animated series on Netflix. Well, there you go. That's how you start it with a 5-year-old. You know, Darren Doctorman, one of the Inglorious Treksperts. Darren Doctorman tells me and has told the story on Inglorious Treksperts about how the first Trek he saw was the animated series. I wholeheartedly recommend the original series. If you have a 5-year-old and you want to start them on Star Trek, the original animated series. It might not be the greatest animation in the world, but the stories are good, and it won I believe it won a Children's Emmy Award or a Daytime Emmy Award. Absolutely, and I think it's great that your young son is streaming the original series, the original animated series. That's awesome. That's fantastic. CW says Rob is the balance of the Force. I don't know about that, but I certainly hope episode 9's okay. I hope so. I hope Springs Eternal. Pre-live teaser says the TNG episode where Picard and friends are turned into children, that would be Rascals, which I actually kind of liked. The guy who played Picard was great. Terry Flynn says, Willow, yeesh, yeah, I gave season 1 of Discovery the benefit of the doubt, so I understand you. It's season 2 that I'm feeling so disappointed by. My God, they can't do anything right on season 2. It's such Silva. It's such a dumpster fire. Silva Sif is here. Force Awakens ruined Star Wars for me. Well, Silva, I hate The Force Awakens too, because it was here. Let's try and change Star Wars into something else by creating these new characters that you guys don't care about. If I had made The Force Awakens, I would have used the triumvirate people did care about: Han, Luke, and Leia, and then Chewie and R2 and 3PO, and used that first film to caress the new characters in. Instead, the movie opens with Pierce Poe Dameron talking to Max von Sydow, Lars von Tucker, or whatever. Who are these people? Why do I care? I mean, I'm caring because it's Star Wars. Somebody gets out, Kylo Ren gets out. Ooh, he can stop a blaster bolt. It was really weird to me. Like but look, I mean, it's Star Wars. I'll watch them. I think it's telling that I do not own any Hot Toys from this latest trilogy. They've made some great toys. I own none of them. Maybe one day, if I have extra disposable income, I might get around to buying them. Let's see. Gallant Sector says, I enjoy Star Trek Discovery, but I'm feeling it as very different than what I expected. The universe feels so different from TOS and TNG. Totally. And the universe, where's the universe? Apparently this Red Angel storyline, it's just the Discovery and Section 31, who's everywhere now. Where's the rest of the fleet? Where's the rest of Starfleet? I don't know. Does it matter? I guess not. Patrick Glanville is here. Another really bad thing is how they badly course-corrected after the bad initial feedback from last season. Last season was so much better. I never thought I'd say that, but you might be right. Vesna's here. Hello, Vesna. How are you? I love you, Vesna. Vesna's Vesna sent me a picture of herself as a little girl, which is fantastic. Her fashion sense was amazing, even back in the day. But what was amazing is when she said to me that she's standing next to a 3-foot fence and she's not as tall as the 3-foot fence. But it's a picture that I'm going to put up, Vesna. I'm going to put that picture up in the Imagination Connoisseur Gallery because it is an outstanding photo. Vesna says, Writer BL Alley, where can we read your novel? I would like to read it. Kaleda says, don't associate the Gorn with such hideous trolls. Gorns are cool. I love the Gorns. You might be right about that. But, I actually love my expanding man breasts aren't allowing me to, but, they're going down again because I've started to work out again and I'm not drinking for a while, which is good. So I can wear the shirt, but it is a little tight. Gene Roddenberry says, I find that after 2 years of talking to Discovery fans, they genuinely hate TOS, are indifferent to it. I know. Look, I understand. I get it. Look, one thing I love about Discovery is that they're shooting in the 2:39:1 aspect ratio, the wide aspect ratio. I think it's great. It looks very cinematic. The production values are great. But yeah, because it's not Star Trek. They're going to go back and they're going to watch how many hundreds of hours of Star Trek are there? 700 plus hours of Star Trek. They won't like any of it. That's too bad. Some might. Ronson710 said, the inclusion of comic book villains wrecked the JJ movies. Trek isn't about villains. Couldn't have said it better myself. As I've always said, Trek is not about villains, but Trek has antagonists, which are different. And I said this yesterday, Star Trek 09 has the stupidest villain that's ever been in a big budget science fiction movie. A villain who's angry about his homeworld being destroyed, who travels back in time and could actually save his people, but doesn't do it. He rather would go on seek vengeance. And if you think about the timeline, they were thrown in a Klingon prison for 25 years. Yeah, that's some good writing. Patrick Landville says, Vex 14, so you're fine with bitter old man Luke dying alone on that planet? See, here's the thing about that. Did he die on that planet? And I mean, he basically saved what's the remnants of the rebellion. I mean, I'm not fine with it. Was that what I want to have happen? No, but see, there's a difference. Here's the difference. The difference is the story they tell, especially Luke's story in The Last Jedi, is unexpected, but it's not necessarily wrong. I thought it was an interesting way to go that. And what did that do to the galaxy? Perhaps, Luke inadvertently, by his inaction, gave rise to the First Order. They could have made it a much more interesting story, but I don't necessarily disagree with it. I didn't hate The Last Jedi the way I hated. I mean, I dislike Thor. That's what got me buying Thor again in the 80s, man. I love that run. It was great. Matthew Poole says, you're a wealth of knowledge, Robert. Like you, I loathe Discovery, but I prefer you talk about something you're actually passionate about. Yeah, I agree. Terry Flynn says Joe Rogan is a libertarian. Some of his views might be regarded as right-wing and others left-wing. You're absolutely right about that. I should have said he's a libertarian. But what I appreciate most about Joe Rogan is the conversations he has with people, the long-form conversations he has with people. Silva Surfa says, thumbs up and fire to Simon's story. Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Learning Disabled Spock is here. To be fair, is it really trolling when you're just pointing out basic and fundamental mistakes and choices the writers make that are antithetical to the IP they're working on? No, but again, it's the way you do it. People have accused me of personally attacking the writers on Discovery. I'm not personally attacking them as people. I'm sure they're wonderful people. I am personally attacking the showrunners, and the writing staff can only do what the showrunner, Alex Kurtzman, or now Michelle Paradise. I mean, Michelle Paradise is certainly not living up to her name as the new EP and co-EP and the new showrunner of Star Trek. Judging by going by her script that she's written, I'm like, I don't even know. Look, I know it's a job. I really do. I would really like to get some really passionate people about who are passionate about Star Trek. Discovery has been handicapped, and I do mean handicapped, since its inception, because getting rid of Brian Fuller and getting rid of all of the original story concepts, there was no spore drive in Brian Fuller's conception of the show. They were talking about the mycelial network because it was all about terraforming. And if you know anything, I mean, Brian's sort of obsessed with the real, I think it's real Stamets. Is it Paul Stamets, the real scientist's name, who studies fungi, and he's a very interesting cat. And Brian Fuller used some of his concepts in Hannibal, so Fuller's concepts were really, really interesting. I mean, yeah, he came up with the idea of using the mirror universe. Gilbert is barking because there's people here coming, but it was bastardized. The showrunners took what they wanted of those 13 original story outlines and the 2 original scripts, and they reworked them badly. So the show has been sort of a Frankenstein creation from the very beginning. And even this season, the first 5 episodes had Harberts and the other showrunner, and then they left. So it's all of this back half of the season, they're bottle episodes and course correction. So we've never really seen a Star Trek Discovery that has a real vision behind it. It's been compromised from the get-go, and that's all we've ever seen. And it's really too bad. It kind of bums me out. Uncle Remus is here again. Sonequa Martin Green going to make Space Jam 2, which I think will be a blunder. Kids don't watch Looney Tunes anymore. Maybe she will leave Star Trek Discovery to make movies so Star Trek Discovery can improve. First of all, I don't think Sonequa Martin Green is the problem. I think she's a fine actress. I think she's a beautiful woman. I think what she's been saddled with in terms of scripts are ridiculous. They've made, I mean, literally this entire show, the whole Red Angel storyline is really about her mom. Like, really? It's so weird. Like, all of the criticism of Mikey Burnham, I'm like, God, give me a break. And that storyline makes no sense at all. Right, Gilbert? Come here, buddy. Oh, well. Anyway, not good. Nihilist Shadow says Michael Burnham's mom in an Iron Man suit could move planets. She officially generates more power than an entire 24th century Galaxy-class starship, which could barely nudge a small moon. It's so stupid. The time crystal, all that is just so dumb. It's just bad science fiction. It's bad writing. It's bad. The whole thing with this sphere, like the sphere, this life. What is it? What is the sphere? How did it gather all of this knowledge? It's just, I'm like, what? Give me a break, man. It's just terrible, terrible writing. Mage Grey Wolf says, why go back to watch older movies? Because it's not just about the visuals, but the story. Couldn't agree more. I mean, it's all about character. It's about character and story. And it's sure. Did storytelling evolve cinematically? Yes. Did editorial evolve cinematically? Of course. Film evolved. I mean, we went from silent films to sound films, from black and white to color, from flat films with the Academy ratio to widescreen, Panavision, 70 millimeter, whatever. Film is constantly evolving. But great stories are great stories. Great stories are eternal. Once you start overlooking the actual colloquialism of certain stories, every story, there's a reason why the great stories endure. There really is. Chad Crypto says, I remember when I was 6 or 7 watching Land of the Lost from the 70s. I thought the dinos looked awesome. Went back when I was in my 40s, What the fuck? Laugh out loud. How my perspective has changed. Yes, but you know what's really interesting about that, Chad? Land of the Lost has some really interesting stories. Remember when they brought in Enoch, the Sleestack from the future, and the pylons and there's some really interesting and very heady sci-fi concepts in a lot of those episodes. David Gerald was one of the showrunners on that show. Oni Munima, I can't pronounce this word, but I love Umuamua. Umuamua. Laugh out loud. My kids cringe when I make them watch my favorite classics. They're quick to point out the FX flaws. Well, see, that's the funny thing. Now we're getting all this CGI, and it's kids are looking for that. They can't. They have an inability now to suspend their disbelief with certain things because they haven't been trained not to. I mean, they haven't been trained to look. They're always looking for flaws. That's the first thing they see. I mean, look, even Raiders of the Lost Ark or something. You know when the Jeep plunges off the cliff in Raiders, the Nazi Jeep during the truck chase. Yeah, it's a matte painting, and now they can make it look more photorealistic. But it could be different. Pre-live teaser says R&B Brando, Montgomery Clift, and James Dean were seen as actors of their generation. How are ours? I think it's different. I mean, matinee idols are different now, but I think we have some really, really great, great actors. Daniel Day-Lewis. But, it's funny. Daniel Day-Lewis was not a pinup. He hasn't been. Daniel Day-Lewis, everyone would agree, is a great actor, but the iconography of James Dean and the romance of James Dean's life and Brando's life, the world is a different place now. So we view our cinema idols differently. We don't see them as gods anymore. They're people. I mean, but I think there's a lot of great actors now. Liam Neeson, he's actually a really fine actor. People like Stellan Skarsgård is a great actor. But they're never going to be considered in the same realm. It's just different. Learning Disabled Spock says Orville threw a red shirt out in airlock and it was a moving scene and even thought it was a crewman number 5. And even though it was a crewman number 5, it wasn't done flippantly. I know. That was a real low point in Star Trek history when they spaced that character. Alexander Wilson says, with all of your criticisms of Star Trek Discovery, a lot of publications give it good reviews. For example, the AV Club gave the last episode an A-. I used to look at the AV Club. I used to love the AV Club. But to me, it's like, anybody who has a working knowledge of good storytelling, look, if you like something, you give it a pass. But when it comes to science fiction, there is such a rich history. And if you're not aware of it, sure, you can sit back and go, hey, I like that episode. But if you are, it's really hard to go back into the history of science fiction and watch something like Star Trek Discovery and get anything out of it. Travis Rayner says, or asks, do you think the Orville does Star Trek better than Discovery? And greetings from Tacoma, Washington, where my Aunt Barbara and Uncle Herman live. My grandfather's furniture store, Schoenfeld's Furniture, was there for years and years, decades, actually. I love Tacoma. I saw David Bowie at the Tacoma Dome and Bruce Springsteen. I saw many shows in the Tacoma Dome, actually. The Tacoma Dome is wood, so the sound is great in there. But anyway, Comedy King says, I'm live. You are live. Writer BL Alley says, I'm a fun guy. Aaron Johnson says, the stream can go longer to make up for it. Real Girl 26 is here. Hello, Real Girl 26. R&B just cracked me up. Why don't you tell us how you really feel about the current Star Trek writers, Rob? Look, I'm sure they're lovely people. They're just not writing the proper show, man. I mean, but then again, I'm not writing it either. And they're doing the job they can. Rob, I think we have a problem with the stream. Do we? Do we have a problem with the stream? Wait, did the stream really? There was no stream? Was the stream gone for a while? Did it disappear? And I didn't even know that. It just disappeared. Wow, Victory Unlimited. Thank you. That's a very generous super chat you just sent in, Victory Unlimited show. Thank you for that. You made my Friday. Victory Unlimited show says Star Trek Classic versus Star Trek Discovery is just like the original Doug Mensch, Bill Sienkiewicz Moon Knight versus all the newer interpretations. The originals were deep, poetic, and thought-provoking, while the new ones are over-the-top, soulless, and quickly forgettable. My man. Oh my God. Did you do that on purpose? Victory Unlimited Show. Okay, Victory Unlimited Show obviously must know something about me, because I started reading comic books again. I'm going to tell you the story of how I started reading comics. So I had a paper route. I was an entrepreneur even as a child. So I had this paper route. And one of the people on my paper route were the Cullens, nice family. Lived on kind of this corner, and I'd ride my bike up to their front door because they had a concrete path, and I'd drop their newspaper on the front door. If I was on my bike, sometimes I was walking the route. So Robbie Cullen, their son, who was younger than me, was reading Camelot 3000 number 4 on his front stoop. If you guys haven't read Camelot 3000, it's great. Brian Boland art, Mike Barr writing. Mike Barr, who wrote some good Star Trek comics. And it's on Baxter paper, which I'd never seen before as a direct sale book. So I get this comic and I'm like, what is this? And I'm looking at him. I take it from Robbie and I'm looking at this going, this is a comic book now? I love Brian Boland's art. It was so, I'm like, oh my God, I got to jump on this shit. So Seattle has a comic book store called Golden Age Collectibles. It's still there. It's in the Pike Place Market. It's been there for 50 years, I guess. And I go down there and I had to get Camelot 3000, which I did. Well, that was a direct sale only book. So because of that, I started going to the comic book store. And Marvel Comics had 3. It was an experiment. Because there were things coming out like Frank Miller's Ronin and these Baxter paper books, like the Legion of Superheroes and New Teen Titans and Vigilante and the Omega Men were like DC's first foray into the direct sale market. Was comic book only. You couldn't get comic books on spindle racks and bookstores anymore. Where Marvel, their first 3 direct sale comics were Micronauts. I say Kazar, but it's Kazar, whatever you want. I don't know the pronunciation. I've always said Kazar. So it was Micronauts, Kazar, and Moon Knight. And Moon Knight was it was Moon Knight's first regular book, and it was drawn by Bill Sienkiewicz, and it was written by Doug Mensch of Shang-Chi fame. So I started picking up those 3 books. And Mike, a lot of people said that Moon Knight was a Batman ripoff, which, to be fair, it kind of was. But I loved Moon Knight because Moon Knight he was Mark Spector, who was like this rich mercenary, who became Moon Knight because he was left for dead by his leader Bushman, and he saw the moon god Nashu. It's a long story. You got to read, but anyway. So then he comes to New York and he sets himself up like Bruce Wayne. He's a rich guy. He's got a hot girlfriend named Marlene. He's got his Alfred in the guise of Frenchie, and he has his moon copter instead of a Batmobile. But the cool thing about Moon Knight was he would also be like Jake Lockley, who was a cab driver. So he had his ears on the streets and he knew what was going on. And what was really interesting about the book evolutionarily, as you watched the book or read the book. So it was Bill Sienkiewicz, and he was heavily criticized for sort of aping the style of Neil Adams. He was very Neil Adams-esque. And I think he responded to that by mutating before our eyes. And indeed, he left Moon Knight to go do New Mutants. But his style started to change it morphed into the Bill Sienkiewicz that we knew. And when Moon Knight went direct sale only, it started out as a book that was on the newsstand. And I want to say it was like issue 18 or 19 that it went direct sale. I'm not sure. How do I remember any of this stuff? But when it went direct sale, his style started to change, and it became that style that we love of Bill Sienkiewicz. And he did the Werewolf by Night issues 29, 20, it was 28 and 29 is issue 30 with the guy with the scimitar on the cover. I mean, it was so great. But what Victory Unlimited is saying is that yes, as Moon Knight progressed, these shows were the issues were very deep, and they were very lyrical, and they really talked about human truths. I mean, they dealt with abuse, and there was a character named Stained Glass Scarlet who was a great tragic romantic figure. The Werewolf by Night episodes or issues came back, and Werewolf by Night was where Moon Knight was first appeared in like the Hulk magazine, and but you're absolutely right, Victory Unlimited. You're absolutely right about what I never liked Moon Knight as much as I liked the Mensch Sienkiewicz issues. I thought later Moon Knight, what they've been doing with the character now, they've leaned into the fact that he's sort of this split personality, and they've actually made Moon Knight crazy, which is sort of interesting. But when he was just like part of the West Coast Avengers and the later comics, it was just an ordinary superhero comic. But the original Mensch Sienkiewicz run, and it only ran, I want to say it ran 38 issues, but then Kevin Nolan took over in issue 31 maybe and drew the last issues. But it was a really meaningful, soulful comic, just like you said, Victory Unlimited. I completely agree with you, and I really appreciate that super chat, because you're right, and I think that's what's missing from Discovery. It's all about plot, and it's no longer about. And the problem that the story is so weird and convoluted. Like, what story are they telling? Like, I'm sure the story that they're telling now about the Red Angel is not the story they were telling about the Red Angel, because the story about the Red Angel like involved the entire crew, all about the faith versus science. All of that is out the window. They had to figure out how to do a massive. Do you know what Star Trek Discovery's second season reminds me of? The first season of Designated Survivor. I talked about this once on the show. The first season of Designated Survivor, like the first 10 episodes are amazing. It's when I say amazing, it's like going to the bookstore at the airport and buying a really great airport novel, a novel that is trashy but is brilliantly plotted and moves kind of like the Da Vinci Code. The Da Vinci Code, I once heard somebody say the Da Vinci Code is the worst book you'll ever love, which I totally believe. I absolutely believe that that's true. But the Designated Survivor was that. And then there was a long hiatus, and apparently there was a lot of tumult behind the scenes. The original writing staff they got rid of, and the second half of Designated Survivor is a complete dumpster fire. It betrays everything that was good about the first 10 episodes, and it bummed me out, man. I was bummed out from Designated Survivor, and thank God I stopped watching, because it would just get me angry. I tuned in the second season, like, I don't even know what the show is. Star Trek Discovery's second season is like the first season of Designated Survivor. It started out being this one thing. It went way over budget. The showrunners were fired. They had to regroup and figure out what they're going to do. And they tried to fix the latter half of the season, and it spun off into gobbledygook. It's just ridiculous gobbledygook. Excuse me. Dr. Gaster says, if you could write a Star Trek episode, what characters would be in it, and what would it be about? Oh my God. I mean, you'd have to give me a show. You'd have to give me a series. Like, I would probably want to write an original series story. But that's interesting. I would probably write a story about the idea that the consequences of the actions of the original crew. Star Trek 2: The Wrath of Khan got into this. When Khan says Captain Kirk never bothered to check on our progress. Well, a lot of the time in the original series, they would have these adventures. They'd go onto a planet, and then they would leave. Like I would love to have revisited, say, Errand of Mercy, when you have the planets of Meteor and Vendikar have been fighting this virtual war, and people have been going into disintegration booths for hundreds of years. They've figured out how to fight an intergalactic war and manage it, keep it manageable. Fight it in a civil way so we don't blow anything up. People just walk into disintegration booths. And then Kirk comes and puts an end to it. Well, what happened to Meteor and Vendikar after they left? What are the consequences of actions? I would do an overarching story about how Kirk would have to deal with the consequences of his actions. I mean, Star Trek 2 is kind of that story, but on a planetary scale, and something like that. Just off the top of my head, that was the first thing I thought of. So, I don't know what that means, but that's the first thing that came to my mind. Alexander Wilson says, what you just said sounded elitist. A person can interpret what you said as you're stupid if you like Star Trek Discovery, and I'm way smarter than you because I watch boatloads of sci-fi. Sounds like toxic fandom. I know, and that's why I started. Here's the thing. Here's it. It's not that I'm not saying somebody's stupid. By the way, that's a very valid criticism. But I am saying that if we live in a world where there are a lot of great time travel stories. And I could think of, off the top of my head, Back to the Future is a populist time travel story, but they deal with the concepts, the ramifications of time travel in a very unique and interesting way. And I would say that with Star Trek Discovery, they're doing a disservice to people by treating time travel the way time travel is a much more interesting, much more compelling subject for a science fiction show than I think than I think Discovery is using it as. And certainly Star Trek, I certainly think that even Voyager's Year of Hell, which I think is actually a great two-parter. The only problem that I have with Year of Hell is the end. But I if somebody's first exposure to time travel would be in the Star Trek episode, with the Discovery, the whole idea of the Red Angel, I would feel that they're being. It's like in my mind, it'd be like reading a very cursory history book, a pamphlet of 20 pages that deal with American history. You could get the gist, but it's really doing you a disservice in terms of your understanding of what American history really means. And while you could like that and certainly have a working knowledge, as I've said, I don't begrudge people who like Star Trek Discovery. I do think, though, this show is doing a disservice to people by not giving them or presenting them the kind of compelling stories that Star Trek gave people for 40 years. Maybe it will. I mean, I don't know. I hope it does. That's why I said I don't begrudge people who watch Star Trek Discovery, but I don't like anything that I think does a disservice to people's intellect and intelligence. I don't like when people are reduced to certain things, and I think it's bad for everybody in the long run. And I wish Discovery was a better show because the people that like it would get more out of it in the long run if it were. I think that what's happening now, and I'm not saying those people are stupid. They're not. I'm not saying someone's dumb because they like Star Trek Discovery, especially people who haven't seen Star Trek ever before and it's their first taste of it. Certainly, it's got a lot to like. The cast there's great cast members and the production values are terrific. And I just think the stories are doing a disservice to people by presenting them with stories that are half-baked and don't do justice to the very issues that they're addressing. And I would feel that way about not just Star Trek, but anything that did that. But I don't ever want to be. Look, I've said enough that I think if you like Star Trek Discovery, it's great. But I do think, I do not think that The Last Jedi, if The Last Jedi was the first Star Wars movie that you ever saw, I don't think it would do a disservice to Star Wars. I think it actually tells a really interesting story. What happens to Luke is really, really compelling, especially if you didn't have any previous expectations going in. But then again, I said this whole chat has been about me being a troll and feeling bad about it. So, yeah. Kevin W. Clark says, this week's episode title made no sense. Perpetual infinity. It's an oxymoron depicting the same concept in the word infinity. They try to sound smart, but context is meaningless. Dude, I feel the same way. Perpetual infinity. I mean, it sounds cool. It's like, I'm sure somebody's like, yeah, that sounds cool. Perpetual infinity. Yeah, I know. What do we do? What are we going to do? Aaron C. says, currently, I'd have to say The Expanse is now a better show than Star Trek. Do you agree or disagree? Dude, The Expanse rules. It rules. I like The Expanse. And as somebody pointed out to me, the 8th book is now out. As a matter of fact, I think Nerdrotic started his review of this week's Star Trek Discovery of Perpetual Infinity. He started his review talking about the 8th Expanse book coming out. I love The Expanse. I think The Expanse is really great. Again, the reason The Expanse is great is because they have the books to draw on. They're basically doing a book a season? So they've got the literary story. They've got this great story that's already been thought out by the author. So he knows what's up. And that's why the show works. And I think works pretty well. I love The Expanse. And it goes, if you know what's going on in the books, it gets crazy. It gets crazy. Shazam Chavez says, Killer Joe. Well, I hope you like. By the way, Shazam, thank you for that generous super chat. I got to say something funny about that. Shazam Chavez said on was on Twitter? Oh no, maybe it was on Facebook. I posted the Chinese Infinity War poster, and Shazam's like, "Wait a minute, you're live on the John Campea show right now. How can you do that?" And I wrote back, "I'm everywhere." But I was indeed live on the John Campea show, and that poster popped up, and I'm like, "Oh, I got to post that on Facebook." So I did, and you busted me, Shazam. You noticed. So yeah, that's true. Vesna says, Dale M, better to make that one happy than angry. I agree with you. Real Girl 26 says, I have no game. I would find a dog and get distracted. I like that. Joseph is here. He says, I could never get into TOS. Everything about it is dated, in my humble opinion. Not just the graphics, and lots of acting is bad. What? I just remember that Kirk Gorn fist fight, for goodness sake. Come on, man. But I feel you. I know. I know it's terrible. Bob is here. Bob says, I called the change of tone last night after Mikey Spock said, kick ass. First half almost felt like sci-fi could happen for everything to be dropped. Yep, it's true. Yep, I agree with that. Mark C says, Star Trek Discovery is going to wind up going through showrunners like The Prisoner does number 2s. What Mark C is referring to is the incredible show, the 60s show, The Prisoner. It only ran 17 episodes, but it's Patrick McGowan's masterwork. If you guys haven't seen The Prisoner, a lot of TV is taken from The Prisoner, but it's a fantastic television show. Fantastic. You got to watch it. Bunyan Snipe says, I want a story about the first Gorn Starfleet captain. Great idea. I'd love that. Somebody put it in a novel, but I don't remember it. I don't know if they did, but they probably did. CW says, that's what I love about Wrath of Khan. The sins of the past catch up to them. Yeah, I think that's always a cool story. It's always a great story when the sins of the past catch up with you. I mean, certainly Black Panther and the story of Killmonger is that kind of story. I've always loved those stories. I love that kind of stuff. I loved Vesna is talking to Willow Yang. I love that. That's like the greatest thing ever for me. Vesna says, I know, isn't it great? I guess you're talking about Canada. I have some friends who immigrated to Vancouver. I began my drinking career in Vancouver because I lived in Seattle. I'd go to Vancouver. We could drink when we were 18, which is great. Bill Barkley says, is it Mother's Day in other parts of the world too on Sunday? I don't know. Our Mother's Day is in May, right? Well, listen, everyone, I got to get back to work. I got Tango Shalom work. I got to get it to the sound guy. I got stuff I got to export. This has been a great chat. I want to thank you. Everybody has been very supportive thank you for all your generous super chats. And thank you all for being here. All of you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community, listening to my confession about being a troll. Thanks for putting up with me. I'm going to jump off now. You will see me over the weekend. I will be at WonderCon, I hope, if I finish all my work. And if you're at WonderCon, come say hello. And next week, I will be in Vegas at CinemaCon with John Campea. And I will be broadcasting from there, but probably at night, maybe in the morning. I'm not sure. I've got to take my portable rig, the laptop, cameras, lights, whatever. And so I can still do these chats. Anyway, this was a great chat. I really enjoyed it. Thank you all for putting up with me wearing my Her Universe Gorn shirt. By the way, if I was a girl, I would totally shop and buy a lot of Her Universe wear. This is a commercial. I'm gonna give a free commercial out to Her Universe. If you don't know Her Universe, female geeks just like us made female wear for you ladies out there, and it's great stuff. They make really cool stuff. It was funny. I got this shirt. I think it was one of the first things they ever offered. I'm like, man, I saw this. I think I wanted to say I saw it at Comic-Con or something. And it was on their table. I mean, and I'm like, I got to have that Gorn shirt. It's like a black light Gorn shirt. And they're like, oh, we don't have it any for guys. I'm like, just give me the biggest one you got. So this is a girl's t-shirt, but I love it. And I wear it proudly. I wholeheartedly support Her Universe. They're great. So anyway, by the way, female geek wear is much more fashion conscious than male geek wear, and I love it. So that's a great thing. But anyway, thanks for being here for this chat. And remember, all of you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I end this, the 78th live chat, the 78th Robservations live chat. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for subscribing to the channel, for your ongoing support, and most of all, for participating in these conversations. It's really fun to be doing this with you all. And keep those letters coming. Send them to the Burnettwork.net. You can follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram at RMBurnett, find me on Facebook, or find me on, the YouTube channel right here. Subscribe. Well, everyone,